Holy smokes, I got to get the screen right now. New equipment. What's up, folks? Jeff Colson here, Junior Hockey Live. Give me a second. I will get the camera corrected here. All new stuff. So, different angle, different equipment, different lights. So, Junior Hockey Live, Jeff Colson with Mike Bloomer. Bloomer.
Hey, Jeff.
Here again, right before the holidays to say hello and to talk a little junior hockey. So, how you doing, Mike?
I'm doing well. How's things on your end?
Still recovering from the great coffee caper from last week. That was, man, oh, man.
That thing took you down for a while, huh?
Oh, man. I ruined almost everything I had. All my scouting notes were sitting right in front of me. All my, what we do here, all the stuff from the other stuff, all the junior hockey advisor stuff, and the electronic equipment. And I couldn't have, here's the cup. I couldn't have taken this cup can't see it. It's over here. This is the cup. I couldn't have taken it and poured it more directly in the middle of a laptop and have it cascade over all the paperwork on the desk any better than it did. It was the perfect disaster.
And we know your reflexes aren't what they used to be. So you weren't able to manage the crisis probably in a timely manner.
No, and it's not like those commercials. I did have a paper towel because I had something I was eating, and it isn't one picker-upper, it just absolutely didn't work. So, but the new equipment's fun. Got some new stuff I got to get used to, and more improved and faster and better, and we'll see how it goes. I say that knock on wood just to make sure. So anyway, Junior Hockey Advisor, Junior Hockey Live, Junior Hockey Advisors on Sunday or Monday nights. This last broadcast before the end of the year, we're going to just kind of cover the basics, cover a little bit about what's going on. And any exciting news with you, Mike? Anything good happened this week? Any good hockey?
Well, I mean, I was able to watch a lot of hockey now, still kind of being trapped at home with battling COVID. So I think I'm on what am I on? Maybe day 10 or 11 or something from it. So I'm now able to kind of venture out and, be a part of the community again. But, I wasn't able to go and coach the games that I had over the weekend and whatnot. So I was able to watch a lot of hockey and do some scouting. We had a couple midget tournaments that were going on that, I wasn't able to be at in person, but watched a ton of games on Live Barn and Hockey TV this past week. How about you?
Nope.
Nothing?
I didn't do well. Family in town, family coming into town, and family. Remember, we got a brand new place, and we had boxes stacked to the ceiling in every room, and we had to, either hide those boxes back in the storage unit or unload them. And grandma comes into town, that changes things. My son comes into town, my daughter. By the time everybody gets to the house, gets filled up, it's like, there's. As much as I needed to be out of the road, I found some events this next weekend after everything calms down that I can go. So I'm gonna go watch some good hockey this weekend, which normally I wouldn't do, and we'll get rolling. But let's talk a little bit about. First of all, can you take your camera and tilt it down a little bit so people can see what monstrosity?
We got a little Christmas theme here.
What the heck is that?
It actually used to light up, and it says "light that shit up" is what it says, and the actual shirt would light up, but that doesn't work anymore. So now it's just
so you just kept the rummage sales shirt after it stopped working?
Yeah. I mean, it still has everything you need, just it doesn't light up anymore.
How do I get along with you at all? I mean, what is the attraction that, we even get along? Dude, I'm whatever. That is this is a professional operation here. We're supposed to look good, as good as I can with this mug. I guess when you look at it that way, whatever you wear, that's right. It won't offset what I look like. So, hey, listen, if
you handle your side of this podcast, so you're actually over here, you handle this side, I'll handle right here.
Yeah, you do that. Okay. I needed a controller where I can actually zoom in and zoom out. There are tactics, there are many tactics I could use. I could just do this and we'll move on.
You'll see our followers start declining if that's the only view.
Now the problem is I got to actually figure out how to get you back on again. not that good with this stuff yet. New equipment. Hey, look, if you're on and you're watching, which I don't know who would be watching this, if you're me, say hi. Let us know where you're at. Andrew's already on from New Brunswick, Canada. What leagues are we talking about today, Mike?
Well, since most of the teams or leagues, I should say, are going to be on a little bit of a holiday break, we're just going to take a pause and take a look at the USHL and, talk about who's on the top of the standings in that league and talk about who the top scorer and top goaltender is. Then we'll go to the North American League. We'll go to the NCDC and kind of do the same roundup. And then we'll talk a little bit about the NA3 just had their big showcase in Blaine.
Yep.
That's their big, weekend where a lot of the scouts and different like NA scouts will come and watch and in different colleges, whether it's the NCAA, D1, D3, ACHA, like some of those top D1 programs are there. So that's a big weekend for them. So we'll just kind of talk about how that weekend roundup went.
No problem. Sounds good. All right. Let's jump right in. USHL. I'll get us.
Yeah. So the USHL.
What the heck? Just give me a second.
All right. Hang on. I'll hang on.
I got to get the league up, don't I?
That's helpful. But yeah, while you're pulling that up, if we look at the two different divisions in the East Division, the Chicago Steel, they're currently at the top of the standings, 18-5-1. Obviously the U.S. development team is right on their heels, but credit to them for, again, they're kind of a perennial powerhouse in the USHL now, and at the pause right here, they're top of the division for the East, and then out of the West, the Fargo Force, they're at number one on their side with 16-5-0 record. So not. They're not always up at the top. They're obviously a good program and whatnot, but it's a good season for them.
Yeah, it is. Fargo's doing really well. Lincoln's doing really good in that Western Conference. But what I like right now in the USHL is, the Steel are kind of being the Steel. They're doing what they do. So Fargo and the Steel have kind of, separated themselves. But look at the fight for second place in that Eastern Division right now. I'm not sure if that's big enough for people. Let's see if I can expand that out a little bit so you can see that a little bit better. Look at the fight for second place here. 29 points with a national development program. But, 23 points, at not quite the midseason mark of the year. But you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 teams in it. Now, Madison's doing the old Madison. They had a good year last year, but Madison's kind of fallen on old ways there, I guess. I'm not sure really what happened this year. I don't follow Madison much. But, they're putting themselves out of it at the midseason point right now. But you go over the other side too, look at Fargo's doing what Fargo does right now. They're running away. Lincoln's got a chance there, but between Lincoln and let's say Sioux, you've got 4 or 5 teams there that literally are 1 or 2 games away from being neck and neck. So I think
there's a lot of parity this year.
Yeah, I think that's extremely good and nice. And if you haven't watched any USHL hockey, get online and watch some USHL hockey. Great hockey. The announcers usually tell you who's committed. Announcers are usually really good at promoting their players so you can get an idea, okay, that kid's going to Michigan, that kid's going to North Dakota, wherever they're going. You can also, if you follow these teams, it's a lot of fun to grab a Twitter account for any one of these teams. They usually drop their lineup sheet the day of the games. And these lineup sheets are amazing to look at. There are teams in the league right now that maybe have 1, 2 tops, kids that aren't committed yet. And some of them, it's their top kids because they're still feeling out which way they're going to go, what they're going to do. But as far as their college commitments go, but it's really fun. Highly recommend getting on Twitter, grabbing the accounts of Waterloo, Des Moines, Sioux, whoever it is, and follow and pull up their game sheets. Look at the talent on these game sheets as far as where they're committed to, where they're going to school at. You're going to find most of these kids are going to the top programs. You play in the USHL, you're going to the Big Ten. You're going to go play for BC, BU, Providence. You're going to play North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, those kind of programs, So fun to watch. Now, don't get me wrong. There's kids that go to a lot of different schools. But this is the league that produces the echelon players, the top echelon players. So,
yeah, definitely.
I also
Yeah.
wanted to show you, take a look, and I'm going to do this through Elite Prospects because I wanted to pull up the Steel there and show you the top of the roster. Chicago Steel, there we are. So if we look at the Chicago Steel, let's just grab that top of the roster there. And, 25 games in, 38 points in the USHL. Jack Harvey doing a great job there. But look at this here. We look down at where he's going, Boston University. This is a good example of what we talk about with how you get to these teams. He got to Boston University, or will be at Boston University 23-24, okay, which is next season. But look at his path. Steel, national development team for a couple games when he was with the Steel. Before that with the Steel, 3 years with the Steel. Actually got a little bit of time. Then he was a Gentry Academy guy, and he made his path. Prep, USHL, and then he's jumping right into BU. That's the easy way to do this, to figure out if you like BU and you want to go to school there. You got to be pulling up the roster of BU and looking at backtracking these kids back to see how they got there. If you're a 14-year-old, 15-year-old player, the only way you're going to learn about that is to actually back up from the school, reverse engineer it. It's a great tool, works really well, and you can pull it up. Now, another nice thing is, here's another one of those tricks of how to use EP effectively and get better at it. Hit that Boston University button. It'll pull up this page here. Okay, now if you look here, they've got a list of 12 players and 2 skaters. But look what year it's set on. It's set on 23-24. So now you get an idea of what's coming into their class, and you can look at all these kids. What kids are they bringing in? Where are they coming from? Let's pull up Nick here, the first kid. I am not going to try to pronounce his name, but Tri-City Storm, USHL, going to BU next year. Thayer Academy. He went to the national team for a few games when he was playing for Thayer. Then he went up to the BCHL 1 year, went to the USHL, then to BU. You're going to see BU take a lot of prep kids, so expect to see a lot of prep kids on a BU-BC team. So if that's where you want to go, you might want to try to put yourself in a spot where you're playing the same kind of hockey that they want. If that means going to a prep school and that wasn't in your plans, well, maybe something to think about. I'm not telling you to go to prep school. I'm telling you to think about it. So does that make sense, Bloom?
It does. The other thing I was just gonna say is, if you're a college hockey fan, a lot of people will watch the USHL just to see, some of the kids before they get into college, like what they're going to look like and how they play ahead of time, especially if you're following a particular school and you're kind of tracking some of those guys like you see on that list you showed of the BU guys that are going to be there in the next couple of years. If you start following them, through the USHL, it's kind of fun. It gets you a little bit more involved in the league. But what's really cool now is because there's so much talent in the USHL, you're going to see a lot of these guys as first round draft picks in the NHL, or they're going to be drafted somewhere in the top of the NHL draft. And even if you look at the Steel, they have the Celebrini kid. He's going to be a first rounder. It's a matter of how high in the first round he's going to get taken, but he's another stud coming out of their program. You look around the other teams, everyone's got guys that are going to be drafted at some point into the league. So not only do you get a chance to look at them before they get to college, but you're looking at them before a lot of these guys will become pros in the NHL.
Very true. Very true. I would say being drafted and being an NHL are two different things. Vast majority of first round, second round players make rosters, HL and NHL rosters. You start getting down to that third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh pick. Things change drastically as far as where you end up playing. Not really the same as being drafted in the USHL or being drafted into the NAL. I can be the last guy taken in the NAL and be a roster player because a lot of times in the NAL, they take some home run hits when they draft a kid. In other words, when you're in the USHL may use their last couple picks to pick some really big names out of Europe that they might get to come over to the United States. So they don't need to use them as a first or second round pick. And so the NHL, it's the top of the top players. and working your way down. And when you're doing junior drafts, it doesn't necessarily work that way. You could even go into major junior and look at the drafts, and that doesn't work that way. A major junior draft, an OHL draft, you might see a kid that's the best kid on the team if he goes to play for Windsor. I'm just picking a team. He's the best kid on Windsor, but he was one of the last kids drafted on the team. And what you say, why is that? Well, it might be because the kid, was wavering between going to play NCAA and playing in the OHL, so they didn't want to waste the top pick on a kid that they weren't 100% sure that the kid wanted to play major junior. Maybe the kid had an opportunity in Europe. Maybe the kid, just something could have been there, national development program, whatever it is, where there was options for that kid, and they didn't want to waste a top pick on him. So NHL draft a little bit different. All those drafts work well all the way from top to bottom. You see kids make the roster. So they spend too much time on drafts there, Bloom?
We'll find out.
Oh, we're growing. Okay, let's say I had a couple people before we get out of the next league. Andrew's on. I already said hi to Andrew. Excuse me. Michael's on from Greenville, South Carolina. Good to see you on. Andrew did leave a message with us, and he said, if you are interested, if you want a World Junior update, it's Canada 1, Slovakia 0 in the first period. Way to blow it for me, Andrew. Okay, I was going to get off of this, and I was going to watch the game from start to finish. Guess not now, but that's okay.
Well, that Team Canada team is it's loaded.
I agree. And then Unita come on, and she says game will be on, and she gives you a code you can join, or what do you call that? Blue?
It's a link.
A link. There you go. She gave us a link, so anybody that's like me that wants to watch it afterwards, you can go to the link. Yeah, I think that's really funny too. Yeah, haha, Andrew, ruin it for me.
It's always fun talking to a dinosaur.
Why? Why do you got to go there?
Before we jump leagues, let's make sure we highlight the top scorer, which you actually already did. It was Jack Harvey from the Steel. So we highlighted him. He is a BU commit. He's 25 games played, 20 goals, 18 assists for 38 points. Again, over a point a game player. It's really unique, or it's not unique, but it's funny to see that we talked about the Steel being the number one team in the East, and the top scorer plays on the Steel. When we look at the top goaltender, he actually plays for Fargo. So the number one team in the West has the top goalie. The number one team in the East has the top goal scorer. So,
well, we can pull him up and give him a shout out here. So
yeah, that's Matej, Matej, Maryanov.
I just gotta scroll back. I had him up earlier.
So Matej, just going through
while I wait.
His numbers. He's a 2003. He's played 12 games so far, 10 wins, 0 losses, for a 1.87 goals against average and a 928 save percentage. So he's on fire. He's doing really well. So far, uncommitted. So I'm sure a lot of teams are going to be talking to him over the next 6 months.
6-foot goalie, 157 pounds. Both Slovakia and France, dual citizen in both those areas. So it'd be interesting to see if he makes it in the pros, which one he lists. So, but I like that the youth team he's got there. Can you see that? La Roche-sur-Yon. I don't know what the hell that means, but that would be cool to have on your jersey and on your hockey bag. No idea. Anybody speaks either Slovakian or France, or maybe a combination of both. Maybe you can tell us what that stands for. Because come on, Bloomer, you got to speak French.
Why would I speak French?
I don't know. I figured you had to do something good.
Nope.
Yeah. Nope. So you look at his background, U16 Slovakia, U17 Slovakia, U18. These are all international teams where he's playing for the national team. So he's played for the 16, the 17, the 18, and the 20 side, playing for Fargo. Great numbers across the board. And we had the conversation, Bloomer and I, were talking earlier today, and we were actually doing the same thing we're doing now, which is kind of what we do sometimes. And we were talking about the different leagues in Europe. We did a show last week where we had Jacob Dahlin on talking about Sweden. And many of you may not know this. It's a nice little tool to take advantage of, is to jump onto Elite Prospects, go up to the top of the page, and when you get up here, you can actually click on the teams or the leagues button. But if I'll hit leagues, that'll work. I can pull up leagues. Now, what this does for you is it gives you everything from pro leagues down to semi-pro to juniors, and it gives you all the options like Tier 3 junior in the United States. Here's all your list. U18 leagues. A lot of times people are wondering about the different leagues out there, and we talk about a lot of them. We talk about the Beast, and we talk about HPHL, Tier 1 Elite, NAPHL, but here's all of them. They're listed right there for you. You want to know about the counterpart leagues over in Canada? Here's your 16, 18, U18, U16 leagues. But be careful. If you look up here, Canada's broken down to West, Ontario, and East. It's broken down just like the major junior teams are. WHL, OHL, and the Q over here, the QMJHL. So when you're looking for a list of junior programs, the CJHL, these junior A level programs, except for the BCHL, they're broken into 3 different compartments. You've got your Western leagues. That's your Alberta, British Columbia, Manitoba. SIJHL is the Superior International. That's all around Minnesota and Northern Ontario, but close to the western side, the very western part of Ontario and Saskatchewan. And then over here, this is your central. So you got the CCHL, the NoJo, which is Northern Ontario, and then the Ontario Junior League. And, of course, on the east, you got the MJHL and the Q. So very interesting how they got it broken down in Canada. If you get a team that you don't know about or a league you don't know about, it's a great place to go, oh, okay, I see where it fits in. I don't believe, no, Mike, give me a little guidance on this if I'm wrong. I do not believe there's any thing but alphabetical order going on here. When they're listed.
It's the hierarchy, but within the level, then it's alphabeticalized.
Right. So you're not going to, just because the AJ is your first one in Canada West, that doesn't mean it's necessarily the best league. It just means that it starts with an A. Okay.
Yeah, it's all junior A in Canada.
Very good. Very good. Anthony jumped on saying it says we're giving him out great information. Good to hear.
You must be talking about when I speak.
We're winging it. We're making it all up. I have never seen this page before. It's just something that I clicked the button on and it popped up. So, but that helps. There's all kinds of little tricks. What's the next league we're talking about?
I'll
use this page. Okay. I'll use this page. I'll go to the null from here. Bingo. All right. What are we talking about? Top teams?
Yeah, we'll go through each division, give some more teams some shout outs. So, you're right there on the central. You can see the Austin Bruins. They're, leading their pack 18-5, 41 points on the year. We highlighted them earlier in a podcast against a couple of teams that they were matching up against just to see if they were going to assert themselves or fall back to the pack. And as you can see by their record, they just keep winning. So, credit to them. They're off to a good start. If we move down to the East.
Yeah, just pointing out on that, they're going to be 4 teams that make it into the playoffs here. So right now, the Minotauros are sitting on that 4th spot with 28 points. But St. Cloud and Bismarck still in the game here. It's a long road yet. So even though an 11 and 12 team is there, Bismarck gets on a little bit of a roll, gets on a little bit of a heater. They're back in this game here. They're jumping up. And look at the top. The Minotauros got 2 more games at hand. So if Bismarck just catches up with 2 games, all of a sudden it's a different game because actually if they had 28 games with the 4 points that they could possibly get, they're tied up here. So there's a great race going on from North Iowa all the way down to Bismarck, especially since St. Cloud and Bismarck have got 2 games in hand. That's awesome. That's the kind of – this makes it exciting for everybody because when every team is still in the playoff hunt, man, does that make it fun.
And I wouldn't count out Aberdeen also from at the end of the season, battling for the first place spot. They're always at the top. Langer's now back. He's coaching the team. That's going to give him a little jolt there. So, I think there's probably going to be a battle there at some point for 1 and 2. And then, like you said, between 3 and 6, they're close. Like there's 1 or 2 games separates, the pack there. So it's going to get real competitive in that division coming down to the end.
Yeah, so we jump down to the East here. Give us the breakdown there, Mike.
Yeah, so Maryland, they're currently they're number 1 in the league as far as points with a 22-7 record. They've got a couple more games at hand than a lot of the other teams in the league, but still, they're one of the more dominant teams. They actually have some older players on that team, so they're really primed to make a run at the Robertson Cup. So, they're a team that we're going to be looking at towards the end. When you look at the rest of their division, obviously, Danbury's struggling and some teams are getting fed well when they're playing against that team. But, really you take that team out of the equation. And again, in that middle of the pack, you got a lot of teams real close to each other, battling it out. So this is another division that's going to come down to the end on who those 4 teams are that are in the playoffs. And it may not be who we're looking at right now.
Well, I'm going to pull up and let's do this on the Null site versus doing it on the EP because it's a little bit easier to see the statistics on this. So if we jump into standings on the Null page, and we're looking at this league. Here's a couple things. One, the Danbury, man, oh man, I don't know what's going on there. When your differential after 31 games is almost 80 minus, boy, oh boy, that's a tough year. That's a really tough year. But keep in mind, there's 32 games there. That means they've got 4 games over the 6th place team. Now, when you look at their record, if you add those 4 games in, that's 8 points. That gives them 32. They're right in the running with everybody else. I'm talking about Philadelphia, the Rebels here.
Yep.
Johnstown, same thing. You give them, 4 games, which is 8 points. They're at 34 points. They're battling for 3rd place. So even though these teams look like they're 5th and 6th, because of games in hand, that can change quite a bit. So then you go to the next the next indicator, where they sit as far as a win percentage and your differential. So if you look at win percentage on these, 734 is great. We got to kind of set them aside. But those next 3 teams, they're all in shouting distance of each other. Literally, it can go any way. 613 and 577. You had a win. They're pushing up to 600 right away. When we're talking about Maine there, I'm trying to highlight one at a time. So I think that's a good run. Danbury's out of it, but I don't think anybody else is out of it. Remember, 4 teams are going, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Maine's sitting on the bubble right now at 30, but there's 2 teams right behind them that are in the fight. Now, Maine's got the advantage. They've got 2 games in hand on Johnstown and Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think you could probably look at that too and see which of the teams had series already against Danbury, and the teams that still are yet to play them or might get a little boost there when they finally start getting them on the schedule.
If Philly's got 2 games next weekend against Danbury, Philly might be a plus 28 by the time the weekend's over.
Yeah, that might change.
-14 goes up to plus 28. Yeah, it could happen. Tell us about the Midwest.
So the Midwest, you can see here, Minnesota Wilderness, they're top of the division. Kenai just chomping at their heels here. They're getting close. Fairbanks tied for points, tied for games played. Just doesn't have a win in regulation, which is why they're 3rd. But again, these leagues or these divisions are so close with who's 1st and who's 4th that I think there's going to be a lot of change that's going to happen in the next half of the season.
Mike, I would say it goes all the way down to 7th place there.
Because, I know it's crazy.
You got 2 games in hand with win to go, and a new franchise, and you give them the 2 wins just to say they would win those games, being that they're a 500 team that's most likely going to split. But if you're sitting at 32 or 34 points, they're knocking on the door to be a playoff team in their first year in a tough division. That's awesome. Springfield's not out of it. If Springfield gets on a heater, they could easily pull into the 30s over a weekend. 2 weekends they could be fighting for a playoff spot. So Chippewa's sitting there at 34, but by no means at all is anybody safe yet in this division. Nobody's pulling away.
Well, they're all basically 500 teams. I mean, even Springfield being at number 8, they're 2 games outside of 500. And, again, you go through the goal differentials and things like that. There's nothing out of hand, minus 12. I mean, that could be the story of like a bad month and just being on the wrong side of it for, a couple weeks or a month or whatever. Minus 12 it's not horrible.
Yeah, I fully agree. Once again, great to see a division. Now, next division we're looking at is the South. Let's talk a little bit about the South.
Yeah, these rock'em sock'em robots down here in the South. So you got Lone Star Brahmas here at the top, 21-2 in 1 record. Like we said, Maryland is currently number 1 in points in the overall league. Lone Star has the highest winning percentage. So, they're at the top again. Oklahoma is right on their heels. They just had a series, a couple games about a week or so ago, and Oklahoma got the best of them. So, again, when you look at Lone Star, Oklahoma, New Mexico, those teams are, it's like any team could win on any given day. It just so happens that Oklahoma and Lone Star have pulled it out in some of these games and got the credit for the win. But when you watch what happens on the ice, it's like either team could have won those games very simply, and it just was a bounce here or there, or a goal that went in, or hit the post instead that caused them to either win or lose it. So, but you look at 4, 5, 6, even 7, like they're there. They're going to be a contestant to see who else is going to sneak into that 4th spot for the last playoff spot.
I tell you, though, this is a tough division. You've got Shreveport that's got 2 national titles under their belt in the last 6 years, 5 years. Lone Star's got a national title under their belt in the last 4 or 5 years. New Mexico made a great run last year and walked out of that division and represented really well when they went up to the national championships. This is a tough division. But keep in mind here, there's a couple of things. Go over here and look at the streaks at the far end over here. Here's what's interesting. Look at Shreveport with their 8-2 record. All of a sudden they got hot. They're the hottest team in the division right now in 4th place. Now, you could argue that Lone Star and Oklahoma have been hot all year. Their streaks have stayed pretty much the same. 7 wins and whatever losses. That's the lowest mark for both these teams since probably the last 7-8 weeks. But when you get a team getting on a heater like Shreveport is, that's because they've got that veteran coaching staff and players that still maybe not residuals from their national championship team, but they know what it takes to do things down there, and that's interesting. Odessa got hot for a while, 5-5. That's a 500 record. That's actually playing above their watermark right now, which is 463. So you start looking at these teams and going, are they playing above? 5-3-2 is better for the Amarillo Wranglers than their 596 winning percentage. So they're playing above, they're batting above their average right now, which means they're working towards becoming, what is a 5-3 team? 750, but here's another thing to look at in this whole thing is jump up here and put this into league perspective where you list them all by league. And now it changes things because look at this percentage over here. I sorted the whole league by win percentage. And I did that because now you can kind of see how strong that South division is. They're sitting on an 852 and a 788. And then everything drops into 730s and drastically drops into the 600s after that. Now, the number 3, 4, and 5 aren't up there in the top 10, but boy, oh boy, those 2 teams are separating from the league. If they keep this up for the year, that's going to be some unbelievable regular season records.
Yep. And again, when you talk about who's going to make the Robertson Cup, like Final Four, one of those 2 teams isn't going to be there.
Isn't that a shame? But then again, you look at some of these teams that are up there too. Coming out of Alaska, You've got two
Right.
really, really strong teams here that
Yep.
have a real good shot of winning that division, and they're the exact same team as far as on paper, both sitting on a
Right.
597. It's a shame that that's the way it works, but you may not see the top two teams in the overall league playing for a national title.
Yeah. And even if you keep the screen up there, when you look at the South Division, you have, according to this, the number 1, the number 2, and the number 12 and 14. So in
13.
the top
Oh, yep,
15, you got 4 of the teams in there.
yep. So I didn't get down past Chippewa, but then it drops off. You're going to drop quite a bit down to El Paso and Corpus on the bottom, but still
Yep.
interesting. Extremely interesting to see that. Well, congratulations to all those teams in the NAL. Got a good situation. Can I show one more thing? I
Yeah, go
think it's
ahead.
important to show. Look at the scoring stratification on the best team in the league by record right now. Well over an 800 percentage. Didn't I say, or was it? What was the winning percentage we had on them?
It was 8. I don't know, scroll down a little bit further.
Oh yeah, it's right down here. So they're sitting on an
852.
852. Now, you look at their roster, and they're 852, best team in the league. Look at how equal their top 11, top 12 players are in points. Your top player on this team, 26 games, 17 points, 16 points, 15, 15, 13, 13. They're contributing from everybody, which makes it much, much different. Now, I haven't looked at Oklahoma in a while, but I bet you if we look at them, it's not going to be much of a different story. They might have one guy that's like way out from in front of the pack. Yeah, they're relying a little bit more on the top, and they've got a little bit more on the top heavy. But look at their top 5, top 6. They're all tightly matched up there. It's not one kid in 26 games that has 50 points. You're talking about pretty equal stratification. What's interesting when you're looking at that South Division is it going to be defense or offense that wins the division? Because your goals for Oklahoma 110, the best team in the league has got 81. And that means this. And if you look goals against, they're not that much different off on goals against, but Oklahoma's running away with some games or ran across the streak of games like that. And but it's going to be interesting to see. Does defense overall, that 47 goals against is a top number? And if we look at the whole league as far as goals against, I'd be very interested to see where this is not something I've pulled up and looked at. So now we're looking at the whole league listed. Top 2 teams in the league, there they are. Same thing, Lone Star, Oklahoma. So you've got the 2 top teams in the league that have the 2 best goals against average. You would expect that. But when you've got a run and gun team like Oklahoma, you might not have expected that they'd be second in goals against in the league, Now, some of these teams have played a lot more, so their goals against they're going to be more because some of these teams are in their 30s already. But, I don't think that you added 2 or 3 games to these 2 teams, it's going to put them from 47 to 76. I think they've kind of distinguished that they are 2 of the 2 best defensive teams in the league so far. So Mark's checked in. Good to see you from New Hampshire, Mark. What's the next league we're going to hit it here?
Well, let's highlight the top scorers, or we can highlight the top goaltenders because it's kind of leading into your goals against Lone Star. So the top goalie is
I want
Arthur
the top
Smith.
scorers first.
All right, top scorers. Dave Anderchuk, you can see him at the top here. 10 goals. He's got 29 assists for 39 points, over a point per game. So he's doing well. This is his last year. He's currently not committed. So again, I would assume in the next few months here, he'll be making his commitment somewhere. But he's off to a really good start. He actually, if you were following his points at the beginning of the year, he was one of the tops to start the year, and he's kind of kept it going. So it's not like he was, a streaky type player and got hot at one point and then fell off. He's been consistently contributing every single month of every year so far. So credit to him. Good job. Hopefully he has the opportunity to get committed here, sooner rather than later. He's obviously got good connections from his father with the Anderchuk name there. But yeah, good job for him.
All right, let's jump with the goalies.
Yep. So top goalies, you can actually see 1 and 3 on the list are both from Lone Star. But number 1, Artie Smith, he's an 04, played 13 games. He's got 9 wins, 1 loss, 140 or 124 goals against average, and a 942 save percentage. So, really good numbers. As I mentioned, number 3 on the list is also from Lone Star, William Graham. Again, that's the goals against average and the save percentage is really good. So it's no wonder their goals against is so low and their wins are so high because they're not giving up much. A little over a goal a game they're giving up. That's pretty good.
Either one of those guys committed?
Yeah, Arthur Smith is Princeton University commit, and William Graham is University of Wisconsin commit.
Big time schools, big time hockey schools, and anytime you can go to those 2 schools from the North American Hockey League, you're on top and you're doing something good because you're not seeing a lot of Wisconsin players coming out of the North American Hockey League. So good for both those guys. That's great. Good.
And even when you look at number 6 on the list there, Cameron Corpy from Oklahoma, we were talking about their goals against. He's a Western Michigan commit. So those are 3 big time schools that are committing kids in the North American League. And historically, the NA has done a great job advancing goaltending, and these guys are right up there with some premium programs.
You know something about that program in Western Michigan?
I might have went there. So yeah, I do.
Did you drive through there or go there?
I know. I actually went there. That was one of the schools I was able to get into.
Very good. Okay. Okay. All right. What's the next league?
Now we're going to switch over and go to the NCDC.
Okay. So I got to go USPHL. Boom.
Their site
they don't do it for whatever reason. They don't list it as NCDC when you're talking about when you're looking at their standings.
Yep.
Their website is USPHL. Okay, so here we go. Tell me about it.
Yep. So you got the North. You got the New Hampshire Junior Monarchs there at number 1. They got 30 games played, 17 wins, 9 losses for 38 points. We I don't know, what was it, maybe a month ago now, we did a podcast on the NCDC. They just had their Beantown and they kind of, had their North versus South Classic going on. And the Northern Cyclones were, I think at the time, they might have been on like a 7-game winning streak. They were just tearing it up at that point. And it looks like they've come down a little bit from that point in the season. So you can see New Hampshire just took over, and they're now they got 5 more games played, but they're number 1 in the division.
And it doesn't change much. We were baffled when we were looking at this last year. The perennial powerhouses in the NCDC. Your 3 of your original founding members, South Shore, Junior Bruins, Islanders, all in the bottom half. Junior Bruins and the Islanders in the bottom of their division. You don't see that very often. That's just not what the NCDC has shown in the last 7 years since their inception. So interesting. On the other hand, good on the rest of the league that shows that you don't have to play for the Junior Bruins. You don't have to play for the Hitmen to be on a strong team, and that there's contenders. Right. So good for New Hampshire. Congratulations for staying on top there. And the Cyclones battling for that first spot. And to be honest with you, I don't know how they run their playoffs. Anybody out there knows how playoffs are working in the NCDC? I can find out, but I don't know. Do you? Do they take?
No, not off the top of my head. I'm not sure how they format it.
So anyway, good on them. And what's the South doing?
So, like we figured, Jersey Hitmen, they're kind of running away with it a little bit.
No, they got 41 points to Mercer's 40.
Okay, sure.
It's still possible. I mean, probably won't be, but it's still possible.
If you saw Jersey play, they're pretty strong. And again, we did this podcast and talked about this league, probably a month ago. It might even have been a little bit longer than that now. But, some of the teams that we were kind of highlighting and waiting to see like what they were going to end up being, um, not much, right? They kind of are in the same spot as they were when we went through this, where we were talking about the Rockets, and they typically have a strong program. Connecticut
Yep.
was at that point where they were on the cusp of, are they going to be one of the top teams, or are they going to kind of level off and go back to the mean? And it's not like they're bad teams or by any means, but they had the opportunity to really assert themselves as one of the top teams, maybe just under the Hitmen, for this division. And they're just, a little bit above 500 and still trying to figure themselves out. But, the credit to the NCDC is there's some change of the guard in some regards when it comes to the standings and which teams are at the top and the bottom, aside from the Hitmen. But there's also some pretty good players that, we've seen and we've been scouting and things like that, are doing really well in, again, it's not like they're playing for the Junior Bruins and they were committed to like Boston University as a 15-year-old and are playing in the league. Some of these kids haven't been committed yet, and they're some of the best players in the league. And it's just a little bit different than what you're normally seeing from that league, 5 years ago, 6 years ago, things like that.
Yep. Fully agree. This league has a propensity of all of the players that are commitments are coming from other places first. They get their commit in prep. They get their commit in, playing for a U18 team, U16 team. They get their commitment when they're playing for another junior team, and then they get housed, not hosed. They get housed. Okay, and what I mean by that is, especially the Hitmen. The Hitmen are notorious for having strong rosters, but 15 of the kids that are committed on the team, 12 of the kids committed on the team, whatever the number is, all committed somewhere else. And the Hitmen will still get 3 or 4 or 5 commitments during the year. This last couple of years, maybe not so much, maybe 1 or 2. I'd have to go back and look at that. But the league overall, fresh commitments, just talking fresh commitments, meaning from the time training camp starts to the time the season's over, you get your Division I commitment during the year. The league sits around an average of 12 players a year for the whole league. Now that's 1 or 2 teams in the NAL. That's 1 team in the USHL. If the team is already, if they got room, like if there's 12 kids that are uncommitted, that USHL team is most likely going to commit those 12 kids during the season. Not every kid, but there's a good chance. This league has not been known for putting a lot of commitments out. Okay,
right.
And that you'd always have 3 or 4 strong teams, and it was have and have nots. You'd have the Junior Bruins, Hitmen, Islanders, and then a couple other teams that were strong teams. Then the fall off was pretty drastic. So good to see that there's some fresh blood there. Good to see there's some kids that are going to commit out of this league. I just would like to see before I call them a contender to be what is considered tier 2, I want to see the league start getting commitments from 1 through 7 in each division, 3, 4, 5 commitments on each team from each team in each division. This team's got to have, there needs to be 70, 80 kids committed coming out of this league fresh every year before I think that they should be considered the same thing as tier 2 or BCHL, AJHL related, level of teams. You're always going to have your strong teams. You're always going to have your strong teams there. We know who they are. And we talk about it all the time. We give all the accolades to the strength of the top teams, but it's got to move down.
Yeah, and it's to your point, when these kids are 15, 16, they get committed to an NCAA program. Typically, it is a team in the Northeast area. But once they get committed, if they can't make the USHL or they're just one of those bubble players, instead of them trying to figure out where to play, do I go to the NAL, do I go wherever, because they already have their commitment, they're just going to stay home or at least stay within the region up there and play in the NCDC, continue to get stronger, learn more of the game and things like that. And then they'll end up going into college.
Yeah,
to your point,
because there's
it's all those other kids that haven't got committed that usually have to play in the NCDC do well enough to then get into the North American League and, play on one of the teams there to get the commitment, because there's not enough kids in the NCDC that are getting Division I commitments
Yeah.
that haven't already been committed when they were midgets. And that's what your point is.
And my point is, you're not going to see a bottom third team get that Division I commitment from BU to stay in the area, because they're going to go to the trusted teams. What I mean
Correct.
by trusted, they're going to go to those teams that have been around, the founding member teams, the guys that, they have coaches that have been there for a very long time. For example, the Hitmen. Toby's been there as a head coach now. Geez, it seems that he's been there at least a decade. And I would highly, I think statistics, percentage-wise, I think I'm pretty accurate on that number being 10 or more years. Everybody knows him. Everybody in D1 hockey knows him. They trust that their program is solid. They trust that they've got good foundations, and they know exactly what you get. It's black and white. If you play for the Hitmen, this is what they're going to do. They're always going to be on top. They're competitive, and they run good practices. You're going to get better if you play there. So people are going to park their – the BU coach has no problem if somebody plays for – but if I go lower in that league, that BU coach is probably not going to say, yeah, just stick around and play for that last place team. Stick around and play for the second to last place team. And I'm not purposely not talking about names, because I'm not trying to accuse anybody there of being bad, but this is not going to happen. They're going to play for one of 2, 3, 4 teams in that league, and that's it. So interesting. That's a good point you made there. Are we going to cover the top player in this league?
Yeah. We got the top scorer, Caden Cranston. He's playing for New Jersey Rockets.
There we go.
He's 2004.
Why don't I just go to players and see if they give me man, they don't make it easy at all, do they?
No, and their page was down earlier today when I was looking at it too.
Scoring leaders. There we go. There's Caden Cranston. You know what I like about him? You probably can't see it here, but anybody with a linebacker neck like that kid's got, when you're
you got to share your screen.
Oh yeah, we're not on the screen share. It's just a picture of me. Anytime your neck is equal with your ears, that's a good thing, man. That's a good thing. You're not going to get many concussions when you got a neck like that. So good for you, Caden.
I thought you were going to comment on the fact I think he's a Rochester, New York kid, or at least somewhere from your area. So I thought that's what you were going to say you liked about him.
I'm not a homer at all, so don't.
Oh, yeah. But anyway, Caden here, he's played 29 games, 12 goals, 29 assists for 39 points. Again, anytime you're putting up more than a point a game, you're involved. That's for sure. So, good job on his part. His team, is kind of middle of the pack right now. So, who knows? Maybe they do get hot. We were hoping that they might, or not hoping that they might, but thinking that they might get hot and kind of show their true stripes as what they normally are as a program. And they just haven't quite taken that step, at least in the wins-loss record. But obviously they got a really good scorer and player in Caden.
And Caden is what year is he?
He's an 04.
04. So I'm very curious to see where Caden ends up next year, because we've got a whole nother team in the Null. We, meaning the Null, has a whole nother team to fill. Do you start seeing somebody like him jump over to that new Rochester program and fill there? So very interesting to see. The other thing I think was interesting you just brought up, Mike, is you said anytime you've got a 1.34. Now, here's a real interesting fact. At some point, I'll put it together for the year. I do this every year. I'll put a conversion rate together from last year's guys that came over from the NCDC. So you can do this for every single year. I'll take the top guys that came from the NCDC, and I'll track their points, and I'll put an average together of the points. So let's say the top 10 guys from the NCDC come to the Null, and I'll do this for the USHL too. There's not NCDC guys, but for the Null guys that go there, and put a conversion rate together. And it's usually about the same every year. So is 1.34 points a game, what does that convert to in the null? Now, I would venture to say that's about a 0.5 or 0.45 in the null, but that's something that you really got to pay attention to when you think, clearly he's tearing it up. Clearly he's putting himself on a track to be a great player. But that transition as he moves up to the null, possibly moves up to the USHL, BCHL. If he moves, he might stay right in that league and be very content. But what does that mean? What does it mean when I get a guy that, let's say he ends up with 70 points for the year? What does that convert to, or what does that project? I should say project because, there's no hard number on this. You're projecting what they can do. I would say that projects out to a 35-point first-year rookie in the null. That's damn good. I mean, you get a 35-point guy if he transitioned over and put up 35, 40 points in the null. You're going to get noticed. You're going to go somewhere. You're going to play somewhere the year after that. You agree with that, Mike?
Yeah, definitely. And I was just going to add too, when I'm looking at a kid that is more than a point per game type player, and even if you get even higher than that, some guys, depending on the league they're in, they're 2 points or more. What's impressive about that is most people think that this kid is just, and I don't want to talk specifically about Caden, but any of the kids that are over a point a game or more type players, that all they have to do is basically lace up the skates and go out there, and they're just so much better than everybody else. That's why they're putting up those points. The reality is they're putting up those points because they're working their tails off in each game. They're not taking any game for granted. They're not, I'm too cool to put up points today. Like, this team's not good enough, so I'm just not going to, give 100% effort. The percentage of kids that are going to go 100% effort all the time, and if I'm good, I'm going to be good in every game and be good in every shift, is so few compared to the kids that might have equal talent, or even in some cases more talent than some of these kids, but they don't bring it every game, and they're content.
Part of the maturity level.
Yeah, they're content being good, but maybe not pointing in every game and whatever else. It's funny when you look at and I coach teams, so I'm trying to instill this in a lot of my guys, where my top players, they need to be top players in every game. They can't just be considered a top player because everyone knows they're good. They have to be good every game. And if they're good every game, then they're going to get more opportunities because of it, aside from just winning in that game or having success themselves in that game. And there's just so few kids today that have like that inner drive in them to be that or to do that every single game.
I agree with you, but you see a little thing next to Caden's name, that R, and I haven't pulled up. I'll go back to Elite Prospects and pull Caden up there. It was Cranston, correct?
Yes.
And I am going to use him as an example right now. It was Caden. Is it with a C?
Yeah, with a C. Caden.
There he is. Okay, he's an 04, so he's got a couple years left here. What's our top classes now? 02s or 03s?
Yes, 02s.
02s are there last year, so he's got a couple years left. Why isn't there? We go. Okay, so the good news is he's got. I remember Caden from when he was young, so watched this kid play quite a bit. This is a kid that. He had a breakout year. This is his breakout year when he was playing for Connecticut. Okay, put up really good numbers here. And they played Buffalo Stampede, which that's a head scratcher because I think the kid was better than that, but he had breakout numbers. Now here's a perfect example of what we're talking about. That scale for leagues. USPHL Premier, he pumps up 63. Right now. He could pump up those same kind of numbers, but he's on pace to be. His projected numbers are 65 points, which means he's putting up about the same numbers there. That's darn good. There's a big difference between Premier and NCDC. He's outperforming what is expected of a kid that's playing. And I don't have the ratio right now, but let's say 10 points in the USPHL Premier equals 5 points in the NCDC. Well, he's twice as good right there as far as what his projected numbers are for this year. So that's a good example of a kid that's outperforming his numbers. And there was a point I was going to make. What was your point right before this about not picking?
Just having that inner drive for kids that constantly put up points.
So here's the other part. 28, 29, 30, he had 40 total games in 2021, and he had 44 games. We're halfway through the year, and he's already played almost 30 games. So part of that bringing it every game for guys that are stepping up into the higher levels, especially coming out of 16s and 18s into juniors, even harder coming out of prep or high school into juniors, is the length of the year and how many games you've got and learning how to bring it. Because, a lot of these kids have never skated a 15 or 20 minute warm up before. So not only are you warming up with your players off ice and you're going through the ladders and you're doing your sprints and you're playing with a soccer ball, you're doing all the things you do. You go in, you get a little sweat going there. You go in, you get dressed, you go on the ice, you do a whole warm up, then you jump on and play 3 20-minute periods and maybe an overtime period. A lot of these guys are just not used to that much ice time. They're coming out of high school where maybe they played 15 or 17-minute periods, or prep where they're playing 15 or 17, depending on what league. Some play 20. But if you're playing in some leagues, you're playing 17-minute periods. And you're playing 3 where you're playing 2 back-to-back periods without a cut, with 1 cut, and you're doing a 5-minute warm-up. That's a huge difference in the amount of time you're on the ice skating than you're normally. Not only the amount of games, but the amount of actual ice that you're on, skating and sweating during the year. So not only that, but remember, you're playing for the Buffalo Stampede. You're practicing 2 or 3 times a week. You're playing in the USHL or NAL. You're practicing Monday through Thursday, and you're doing a warm-up skate the day of the game. Then you're playing your game. Then the next day you're doing a warm-up skate, meaning you're out on the ice in the morning working on the power play. You're working out the kinks on your breakout. You might spend a half hour, 45 minutes, or an hour on the ice on game day for practice with a team. So totally different world, and to be projected to still get into that kind of numbers, good for him. But that's also the fatigue. One of the things I noticed the most when my son was playing junior hockey, his maturity on how he went about the game. Used virtually no energy in warm-ups, no energy. Went through the motions and did the minimal to get warmed up, because that was the way his team was taught. They were taught, don't go out there and try to score hat tricks and pick up our corners. Go out there and warm your goalie up, get your hands warm, get your legs loose. You should barely be hitting that sweat level by the time you get off the ice. Get it up to that level, because you just don't want to burn out. And I can remember my first game playing at a high level in that warm-up. By the time the warm-up was over, I was so worried about impressing the other players, impressing the coaches, impressing the fans. I'm out there racing around, hard stops, taking off quick 3 steps to get off on everything. By the time the game started, I was gassed. Now, not only from anxiety and stress, but the fact that I burned myself out on warm-ups. So, and then I noticed, it's also one of those things where the veteran players in junior hockey learned when to turn it on. When you talk about bringing it every game, that doesn't necessarily mean bringing it every shift every game. It means when you get the opportunities every game, you've got to explode and take advantage of that opportunity. There are shifts where, because of the way things are structured on the ice, where you're not touching the puck, when you're not getting out of the zone, there's a lot of NAL players, USHL players, BCHL players that become really good at just learning how to conserve it, so that when it's there, boom, they're able to explode. They're able to take off.
Yep.
That's it. Yep.
That's a good point. I
just made an incredible point, and I get a yup.
You made an incredible point, Jeff.
Yep.
I'm proud of you.
That's my new one with you. Anytime you say anything profound, yup. Come on.
Well, I was just gonna share, when we still have Caden's numbers up here, when I'm looking at a kid, the fact that when you look at what he's got here, even his high school year, what is that, 20 games and he's 17 points. So he's basically a point a game player. You look at each individual thing that's listed, he is a point or above player in all of those. So sometimes when you're looking at players as a scout and you see, maybe he wasn't a point of game player and then all of a sudden, boom, he became a point of game player. And then it's like, oh, well, he finally figured it out. Or sometimes it happens in the reverse where, he's not a point of game, or he is a point of game player. And then all of a sudden he gets to different levels and he can't quite get to a point of game, or he's just kind of struggling. Well, maybe he's plateaued. When
Yep.
you see someone that every stop that they've had thus far, they're a point of game player or better, that means they do have that inner drive, because it's impossible to get a point, on average every single game or more if you're taking games off or shifts off. It just doesn't happen. So to me, without knowing the kid personally, I would think based on his numbers, he's got some good inner drive in him to be a good player. And he's showing it now when he's playing against, 19, 20-year-olds, and he's still putting up those points. So honestly, he's a kid to watch, down the road here to see what his path is. But again, just looking at numbers, I would look at that and say, well, this is a kid I want to watch more.
Yep.
Perfect. All right, let's get into.
I wanted to show you something on EP though. You just talked about that, but for anybody out there that's not using EP and utilizing all the little features on it, I'm on. Once again, we're picking on a player on a good side. We're not critiquing him. We're talking about being positive, and by no means are we trying to get Caden into college here. We just see some things that we can use here, and since they're positive things, we're not picking on anybody. But if you look at this down here, you can go right down and look at the leagues he's played in, and that number you're talking about, points per game, it's listed right there. And if you can see, it's pretty much stratified. Well, he's got almost every league he's played in, he's been above 1, except for his high school year. And he may have been, geez, that's a few years ago, he may have been a sophomore playing on a high school team with all seniors. So that could be really, really good numbers for high school, even though it's a .85. But his 16s in his NCDC and his USHL Premier, USPHL Premier, all of his numbers have been above 1. So that just kind of reiterates what you were trying to say, which was very lengthy, wordy, and redundant.
That's what I like to do. I just have to keep circling back until you finally figure it out.
All right, we got to be done, man. We got to be done. It's the holidays. We've been on for probably close to an hour. We're way over an hour. Holy smokes. Lengthy, wordy, and redundant. Absolutely. If you wouldn't have said that last piece, we would have been done at 45 minutes.
I apologize to our viewers. Some of them have hung in there with us.
Well, there's at least one that hung in there. Thank you so much for everybody that commented. Thank you so much for those that are coming on with us on Wednesday nights to talk just about the leagues, just about the players, just about the coaches, and trying to understand how this whole junior hockey world works. Don't forget Junior Hockey Advisor. The other broadcast, our other stream, is more about the steps and how to work the steps to get up there. Here we spend more time talking about the leagues, the players, and trying to get to know each of them better, and it makes sure that you can understand junior hockey just a little bit better, and when we're not wordy and lengthy and redundant. Mike, thank you so much. This has been great this year. I wish you happy holidays, and I can't wait for us to keep growing this next year and making this just a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for people.
Yeah, definitely. We started this maybe a month or a little bit longer, I think sometime in November. So we're just getting started. So, I hope you have a nice holiday season. I know you said your family's in town. That's important to spend some time with them, get recharged for next year. But for those that are following us, and make sure you like and subscribe, because we're really trying to ramp up now starting this next year, and get more information for you all, and follow more of the leagues as they start. Every week is a new information happens. New teams win, new players, assert themselves in the league. And we want to help cover that and share it with all of you. So,
and give us Jeff, some comments when you go and like and subscribe. You can always DM both of us through the Facebook page or the YouTube page. Send us a message, send us a comment, let us know what we can do better. I get it. We at times, that that way. That
There you
way
go.
it gets lengthy and gets redundant, but we'll try to get better. So everybody, happy holidays. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the new year.
Merry Christmas, everyone.